everyone. Christina Koshman here again, Senior Tax and Estate Planner with MLD Wealth Management. Today we're once again meeting with Cindy Radu, our Family Wealth Enterprise Advisor, surrounding the topic of complete family wealth. This is our second video. So in our previous video, we discussed the topic of complete family wealth and what that term means to different families. Today we're going to take this topic one step further and discuss the meaning of family enterprise. Basically, when a family has the intention to work together over generations to grow all of its forms of capital, it creates what we call a family enterprise. Our focus today in today's discussion is to try to understand the different roles or main parts of the family enterprise. So welcome back, Cindy.
Thank you.
So Cindy, you and I have chatted about family enterprise and the three-circle model before. Can you explain what the three-circle model is and how it helps you frame wealth transition conversations with families?
Sure. So, the three-circle model, I actually did this little diagram because it'll make it apparent. I'll just hold this up here. Hopefully your audience can see that okay.
Yeah, I can see it great.
All right. So, I mean, essentially, it's just that simple. It's a very elegant model, but if you can visualize this Venn diagram where you have three real components. So there's the family circle, there's the owner circle, and then there's either the business circle or, as you've mentioned, the enterprise circle. So just to revisit the enterprise piece, sometimes families actually have a family business, which can be an active operating business, or sometimes it's a holding company that holds a bunch of investment assets, for example. And then the enterprise is much broader than that. So that would include your principal residence, any vacation property, maybe rental properties, any kinds of deferred assets like annuities or insurance, your collections, all that kind of stuff. Right. So don't get sort of bogged down. Sometimes people will see the three-circle model representing just business, and we need to have a broader concept that it applies to this term that you've used about enterprise. Yeah. So as you saw from that Venn diagram, you have these three different circles, and each circle basically represents a system unto itself, but the circles will also overlap. So, for example, the family circle itself, as one might expect, is all the family members. So just as a standalone circle. Now that might seem on first blush kind of an obvious, okay, well, who's in the family? But when you start actually, one of the first questions I ask to families is, who's in your family? And it's kind of like this pause of a moment. What do you mean by that? And so, really, who is in your family? And it used to be, a very easy question. It was typically mom, dad, and your 2.5 kids. But we start then looking at marriages and common law relationships and, different gender considerations, and even broader than that, because a lot of, I would say most people have advisors who they consider very, very close to them, almost like akin to family. Yeah. They have other relatives or who aren't immediate family members in the sense of bloodline, but who are basically, you might refer to Uncle Bob, and Uncle Bob has just been a long, long time family friend, for example. So that concept of family really broadens out to family of affinity. So who's in your family circle really, really close to you? Yeah. The owner circle is really who has the legal ownership to assets in the family. So in if you had a business or a holding company, who owns the shares to the business or the company? Who owns title to the family cottage? Whose name are the investment accounts set up in? So the actual title is what we're looking at in the ownership circle. It can still get a bit confusing though, because a lot of times families have family trusts in place. And this is something that I've had a lot of experience with over my career with trusts. And we often forget that the trustees, whoever has been appointed, while they have legal ownership of the assets in the trust, they hold those assets for the beneficiaries. So the beneficiaries have a type of ownership. And so we need to think about ownership a bit more broadly as well. And then in terms of the enterprise, or again, the business, what we're really looking at there is who really manages the day-to-day stuff for us there. And oftentimes that's not family members. It could be advisors like yourself, and other key advisors who are responsible for the day-to-day management of your investment portfolio, for example. But if there is a family business, there's often one or more family members who are in the business, and there could be other non-family employees who are really key to the success of the operation of that business. So those are the three systems. Where it gets interesting is that the three systems are not static. They don't stay the same, right? You have births, you have deaths, you have marriages, you have divorces, you have changes in owners, and so these are all evolving systems, and we can have tension points within each system, but where things get really interesting as well is where they start to overlap.
Right. So how does understanding of the three-circle model help families?
Well, what I've found, as I said before, it's actually, it's like three circles on a piece of paper.
Right.
But where it gets really, really interesting for families, there's a lot of aha moments when they start to actually try to put people in the circles or the overlap positions in the circles. And just identifying that in and of itself is a really eye-opening experience for family members, because it starts to illustrate who's where and what some of the relationships actually are, more so than mom, dad, and kids.
Right.
And also what happens then is we can start to have a conversation about perspectives. So I'm just going to hold up this little diagram again here. So you'll see all these different overlap points, and right in the very middle there, that's usually dad or mom and dad.
Yeah.
Right. And so if you think about dad or mom and dad, they're in the middle. From their perspective, what they often feel, they may not be able to articulate it, is, oh my gosh, like every decision that I'm making is impacting the family, and I don't know what to do with this. And it can actually feel like a really scary place, but they often want to portray this, I'm in control, I know what's going on, and that'll manifest itself in different ways depending on the personality of the people who are in the middle there, right? From the outside though, so for example, family members who are sitting solidly up here, right? They're in the family, but they're looking at that middle person or people. They're going, oh my gosh, when are they going to tell me what's going on? Do they actually have an estate plan? Are they going to share that with me? I don't want to ask because I don't want to sound entitled, or every time we start to have conversations like this, it leads to conflict. So how do I do that? And so a big part of the three-circle model is normalizing what's going on in a family. So understanding that these perspectives exist across families. There's nothing right or wrong about them, but we just need to acknowledge that and then start to work toward, okay, well, what does that actually mean for our family?
Right. Yeah. So I'm just going to go back to perspectives for a second. So there must be many opportunities that come with understanding perspectives. Can you touch on that a little bit?
Yeah. So, I mean, there are a great many opportunities. one of the most common ones right out of the gate is that it helps address misunderstandings and assumptions.
Yeah.
And we all have these embedded assumptions and misunderstandings about what's going on in the family. So, again, just the example I just gave about, so let's just say it's dad solidly in the middle there. From the outside, if we're saying, oh, he's just being controlling and he's never going to tell us anything, but if we understand that dad's actually feeling vulnerable himself, then we start to break down barriers and we can have conversations. The other thing, though, that's really, really important about this is that we can then start to anticipate shifts in these circles over time, because like I said, they're not static. And so, for example, one thing that comes up often in families is this concept of marriage agreements. So whether it's a prenup or a postnup or whatever kind of family agreement. And so within each of those circles, we can start to anticipate life events that are going to happen and build some proactive policies around those anticipated life events, like a marriage, for example. And so if our family agrees together that we're going to have marriage agreements, then it becomes a much easier conversation for the kids to have when they're starting to get into these relationships, to say, this is a family policy, this is what we've decided, it's not got anything to do, it's not personal to you, this is just the way our family has chosen to address this. And it's a very positive conversation, and it's about the wealth in the family for the benefit of the family for generations to come. Similarly, if we look at, say, for an ownership or into the enterprise circle about family cottages, vacation properties, you can start to develop policies around use of family cottages. Who gets to use it when? What are your responsibilities if you use it? Who's going to pay for the new roof? The deck, who's going to help pull the dock in, at the end of the year, which people do, but they don't do it in a formalized way. So if there's structure around it, it just takes away those misunderstandings and those assumptions that are kind of built into how we use those family assets.
So, and I'm assuming it would also allow families to create a framework to develop the 5 types of capital that we discussed in the last webinar.
Yeah, absolutely. Because the development of all those, the intellectual, social, human capital, all have to dovetail with the three circles, and the policies that you're developing very much are guided then again by this foundational wealth capital concept. So what are we doing this all for? What is the point of all this money? What are we as a family about? And what's our legacy going to be? So it provides the opportunity to have, again, conversations about, even just if you say the financial wealth, you can say in our family, who's interested in the family cottage? Right? Because some people might say, you know what, I'm not interested. I'm living in, the United States now. I'm never going to use the cottage out in BC anymore. We've got our own thing going on. So please don't include me in that in the will. So it's very much a ripple effect, but it provides structure and formality to have those conversations in a safe way with an overall context and foundation. Yeah,
totally. So simple closing question. When do we start? How do we start? Who do we start with having these conversations?
Right. So that's a bit challenging, except that when do we start is yesterday.
Obviously.
And, really it is important to start having these conversations sooner than later, because we just never know when something's going to happen. We're seeing now, flurry of activity with people trying to redo their wills, for example, and their powers of attorney, because it's like, oh my gosh, your mortality, and disability becomes very forefront. Well, the reality is, whether or not we have COVID, we don't know when these things are going to happen. So have these conversations sooner than later. How to start, talk to yourself. Certainly I'd be happy to have initial conversations with anybody to just explore what's going on before things get really challenging. And because once we've let it go too long, it creates another dynamic that you have to work through sometimes before you can get really going on the proactive piece.
Yeah.
And but really who to start with, and we can probably have another webinar just on this, but somebody that you trust, that that really understands this area of work, that has experience in this area of work, and that's what their focus is, and that their model, the real key is that the model has to be collaborative, because no one person can do everything. And if you're talking to somebody who says, oh yeah, we can do all that, and we're all that in a bag of chips, probably not the right person for these bigger picture conversations, maybe for more specific tactical outcomes. But anyway, so hopefully that gives you some idea. And
that's amazing. This was an interesting conversation for me to have with you, just to understand it a little bit more in depth. I mean, I'm definitely not family enterprise advisor, but as a trusted advisor with clients, these are the types of conversations that I am having with clients. But it's nice to know that there's experts like you out there that I can bring into the conversation if I feel like it's over my head. I'm not a jack of all trades. That's definitely the truth. So anyways, so I think that's where we'll wrap up today's conversation. Again, thank you, Cindy, for joining me. I look forward to having many more conversations with you on this. And again, thank you to our viewers for taking the time to watch our video today. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to reach out. Thank you and take care.